I'm trying something different. I've never recorded video on my MacBook before. So I just offered in Women That Connect to do a session on how to make learning content. And Mary said, why not provide some video and upload it? So I didn't really know how to do that, but I'm trying. So I don't know whether this is even recording, if I'm honest, but I'm going to try. So why am I doing this? I guess because actually I've spent in my HR career, I've had all sorts of jobs and hats, and in some of those I've commissioned quite a lot of learning and development. I was head of learning and development across 7 NHS trusts in Leicestershire, and I've also delivered a lot, watched a lot, seen a lot, and you'd see it from a different perspective when you're commissioning learning content. So actually, there are a few things that people struggle with. I'm seeing a lot of content being put out there, and it's fabulous. Some of it, and some of it, people struggle with it. And I think one of the biggest problems is actually putting, so from the expert's perception, or the teacher or the trainer or the facilitator, I prefer the idea of facilitating other people's learning, because I think that gets you into the mindset of thinking that actually you're not training or teaching, you're facilitating learning. And if you want to facilitate somebody else's learning, the first thing you have to do is put yourself in a beginner mindset, or the mindset of the person that you're trying to facilitate. So where the learner is right now is the starting point for any learning content, any facilitation of learning. And it's really important, because if you try to, in one video, say, teach a beginner at cooking and an expert, they're in such different places that you will not meet both of their needs in the same place. So it's a bit like some of the social media avatar stuff. But instead of thinking of it as they are a customer, but think of the learner and think, where are they now? What do they want to get out of this session? And how can you facilitate them getting that? A next kind of issue is that people underestimate not just what they know, but how they learnt it, and all the little bits that they learn to get to where they are. So, for example, if I try and cook with the kids, sometimes I will do things like say to them, right, here's a bowl, let's whisk up something. And I realize they do not have the hand and motor coordination to whisk. They cannot do this. They literally can't do this. Or if you say to someone, right, just crack an egg and separate an egg, there's a learning process where you learn once to crack an egg, to separate the yolk out in whatever way. I use it in my hand. These are building blocks of learning that you then need. If you just say cream the butter, or separate an egg, or whisk something, you're assuming that your learner and your audience already knows how to do those things. Now, in cooking, it's kind of quite obvious, but people forget all the little bit of things of understanding that they have, that build up the knowledge that they have about the world, that allows them to understand at a higher level. So, for example, I went on a really fabulous video editing course, which was for beginners, and it was it was live, so we went into a room, but it took most of the session for most people to just turn the software on and upload a single piece of video to even start the editing process, because the teacher, the learning facilitator, had underestimated their own knowledge. So they went, oh, well, I'm not that good. Actually, no, they understand how to upload things. They understand how to open the software. They understand where the buttons are in the software. And all of these things are kind of the skills that you need to have to start getting into the place of even helping someone to edit. So what I would suggest is it's thinking about, where is the learner? What do they need to know? What are you helping them to facilitate? And chunking it back down from your level back into a much more basic level, and imagining they kind of, what do they need to know to build up to this? And if you can do that, it's much more helpful for the audience, because they can go, oh, and sometimes it's simple. When you see sometimes people show something, so knitting or crocheting, or I just saw a fabulous Akila did how she puts things on. The things she just does automatically, like she said, she uses her ring fingers to cleanse her eyes because of the pressure is less than we naturally have pressure. Now she does that automatically, but you wouldn't necessarily, if she hadn't explained that, which is a really useful piece of information, but you wouldn't necessarily notice. If you just watch someone do it, would you notice which finger they were using? So helping understanding where your learner is at is really important. So then you have to think, and one of the biggest, I suppose, mistakes people make is they try and do too much too quickly. So they're trying to get somebody from A to Z in 10 minutes, and it doesn't work. And all that happens is they might think you're brilliant, but they don't learn much. You need to be more realistic and say, well, am I going to try and get someone from B to C? Or I might try and get someone from S to T, because there are different places. But realistically, I can't get someone from A to F in 10 minutes, or I can't get someone from F to Z. So, for example, in this bit, I'm not trying to explain how to design a session. I'm not trying to talk about how to do the videos or the technology. I'm just focusing on thinking about the learner and the process, because that's one part of the process of designing learning content. But it's an important part, and if you can get your head around it, it's not really that complex. It's just that most people don't even think about it. So imagining where the learner is and what knowledge or understanding of the world or skills they have to be an entry into where you're at. I'll give a really obvious example. So I've had quite a lot of, I've trained lots of people in lots of different scenarios, including having some HR apprentices. Now, when you take on an apprentice, they're usually 15 or 16, sometimes 17. They often haven't done very well at school, or they've struggled, or there's been a blockage. They haven't got any work experience. And a lot of people find it very frustrating with apprentices, because they try and jump straight to F, and they forget that the first things are things like, do they know how to answer a phone in an office? Because there are several things. Practically, most 15-year-olds have only ever answered a phone on one of this. So they don't know how to answer I don't physically know how to answer one of these. Then there's what do you say? So when you answer the phone to your mates or your mum, yo, hi, whatever. But when you answer a professional call, it's very different. We expect different things, but they've never done that. They probably have never. So just teaching through and then getting them to practice. So on day one, I needed my HR apprentice to answer the phone corporately, but for the council, for my team, it's really important. It's really So then she's like, what if I can't take a call? I said, right, okay, I'm going to go around the building and I'm going to phone you. I'm going to go and do some other things, but I'll phone you. So it'll be me. So just practice with me. I will phone you. You pick up the phone. You don't know it's going to be me, but it will be me. And you just practice what you're going to say. And we just did this for about an hour, just practicing a few times. Now, again, I'm trying to give you that example to say just how basic I had to make it to facilitate the learning of that person to start doing admin. I couldn't start on, right, what I want you to do is reorganize the files in terms of what payroll we've got inside Excel. That's far too way along the line. I had to start with, do you understand how to pick up a phone? And do you understand how to answer it professionally? And then we built up the learning from there. And actually she learned, in fact, both of them learned very, very quickly. But we had to start at the beginning. Another example with one of my apprentices is she was getting some external training on business processes. But it wasn't brilliant and I wasn't impressed. And she, bless her, kept failing it. So I'm like, okay, give me the content and I'll have a look at it and I'll see what I think. And what it was about, she had to answer questions on the pros and cons of different corporations. So a limited company, a PLC, and it just had a list of pros and cons. And I said, okay, do you know what the stock exchange is? And she was like, no. And I'm like, okay, so, right. So I sat and went back and explained different types of companies, what the stock exchange was, what a public limited company is, how it works, what it feels like, gave some examples, and then we looked at what are the advantages and disadvantages of limited companies and PLCs, because if you don't know what they are, it's very difficult to compare them. She was like, oh, no one's ever, oh, I didn't read, oh. She passed with flying colours. So when going back to what I'm trying to explain is you need to really think about where your audience is, where your learner is, and how you're going to facilitate and which bit are you going to get them to. If you do that and you do that really well, and then you target exactly the right group of learners in the right way and show them the right things for where they're at and what they want to know, you'll have lots of light bulb. So that's it. Because people are natural learners. Human beings are natural learners, but you have to frame it and facilitate it in a way that makes it easy for them. So going back over that, my top tips are to think about where your learner is right now, what you want to try and show them or facilitate in their learning, and then think about how you're going to do that. And I won't try and go into that for now, but just say that's another big chunk. Just talking to someone is one way of facilitating learning. It's not the best. Interactive, etc., much better. But we'll do that another day, or you can look that up in your own sense, in your own time and research it, because there's plenty on this kind of thing on the internet. So I hope that's useful. If all feedback is good, so if it didn't make any sense or I've misunderstood where you're at, then this won't have been as useful as I'd hoped. But all of that feedback is useful. And if there's anything specific you'd like to talk through with me about constructing your own learning, I can't help you with the content. I can help you with designing a learning experience that is useful for your learners and therefore is useful for you, because presumably you're intending to sell this or use it as content that attracts someone to you. So if you'd like to do some of that way, I'm not going to charge you or anything, because I'm only putting this video on network groups that I know, and there's reciprocity. But if you'd like to do that, or do it in a group, or do it as a session in one of our networking groups, then let me know, and I will ask some questions first to try and find out where you're at, and then we can come up with something. So I hope that was useful. All feedback is good. Thank you very much. Bye. I still don't know how to turn these things off. All right.